It's COMP228 and it's Java programming, and we're talking about this stuff that we're going to be doing for JDBC. Now, there's a couple things that we got to figure out, and one of the things I was talking about earlier when I came in is under Java, you need a driver, right, for MySQL. So one of the things that we need to do is get the driver, look for driver for MySQL, right, for Java, for JDBC. If I search for that, it takes me to this MySQL. Every database provider, Oracle for their database, Microsoft for their database, all of them have some kind of connector. And what I want to get is connector J. So on JDBC for MySQL, I search for driver MySQL JDBC, and I can download this connector right here. You want to grab the zip file, right? Which is going to give you MySQL-connector.java.5.1.37 zip, this one, okay? When you download it from this location, you're going to get a file that looks like this. And inside this package, inside this MySQL, after I unzip it, there's a jar file, because remember, the Java has jar files to make up all of their libraries, their runtime libraries, right? So this one right here is what you want. It's called MySQL-connector-java-5.1.37-bin-jar. Oof. So to make it easier for everybody to get that, I'm going to go and put that up on eCentennial. But I want to show you where you get it. If you're like, hey, Tom got it somehow, but I don't know where he got it from. That would be remiss of me. Pancakes, yeah. And see if I can remember this darn new email or new password. All right, so I'm going to go into our Java course for a second. Let's go into this one. And I'm going to go put it under content. We'll put it into week 11. Under week 11, what we'll do is I'll drag and drop this zip file for you guys right in here. And what I will call it, if I edit this thing, this zip file right here is the connector that you need for MySQL. Okay, so it's up on eCentennial if you can't find it. Okay, so go there, and this little zip file is there. Worst case scenario. All right, I got my zip file, but what do I do with it? So let's open up a new project for our little files, right? So we got some projects here, and I'm going to open up a new project for lesson 10 or lesson 11 today. So I'm going to go up, new project, new Java project. By the way, your assignment, which we're going to talk about, is a JDBC project using JavaFX. What would you create? A JavaFX project or a Java project? JavaFX, right? Because you still do all the same stuff with JDBC as you can do with JavaFX, right? But you can't do JavaFX if you only started off a Java project. It's more difficult. So since I know I'm going to make a JavaFX project, I would create that. But for now, because we're learning about JDBC as a separate topic, let's just add in a Java project. Our project name is going to be the lesson. So COMP228 lesson 11. We're going to click finish. Under lesson 11, notice how I have my source folder. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go new, right? And I'm going to go, hit a new class. And my package is the default package. We haven't really talked about packages too much, but I want to talk about it starting today, right? So what is a package? Okay, I like that. It's a namespace, equivalent to what you're saying, right? So how do we create a namespace that works out for us? What we want to do is I want to get you ready for Android, if you ever do Android programming. It is. And for Android, what we do is we use reverse domain namespacing, right? So if I was going to call, if my company was called, and I have a company called Acrotech as an example, let's say, right? And if I was going to make an application with Acrotech or some other company, let's say somecompany.com, right? I would start off like this: com first dot, and then the company name, whatever the company name is called, company name, dot, and then the name of the application I'm building, right? So I'm building a JDBC application. Let's just call this thing JDBC, right? Now, my name, I still need a name for my project. This is the actual namespace, the package itself. And the name has to mean something as well. So the JDBC, let's break this down. Com.company name is the name of your company. That's what we normally would use to sign our package. This is going to almost like create a unique package name for our application, right? And then we have to make it so that our name for our program is something. I'm going to call this program for now. Again, you can name it the name of your application, which I recommend. But for now, that's fine. I also want to make this the main program, our driver. So we're going to use the public static void main method. And we'll leave the other ones checked in for now as well. Press finish. When I do that, it creates my namespace. But take a look. My namespace is now com.companyname.jdbc as opposed to the default package. So why would I want to do that? Well, it differentiates my application, and it doesn't mix up my application with somebody else's application. Especially if I want to create my own software, my own package that I want to share with somebody else. If you want to use my package, now all my code and everything else is in a unique location that's not going to clash with your own. All you need to do is include my namespace and call my classes and my methods that are included in my package, and it won't clash with your own. Okay, that's the first thing. All right, so we have our package, and we have our main program here. And like I said before, we need to add our driver so we can create or connect to our Java database, right? So how do we do that? Well, I need to right-click on my project and on a new folder. Right, so let's add a new folder. And this new folder that I'm going to add in, I'm going to call this right on my project. I clicked my project, new folder. And in my new folder, I'm going to call this thing something like lib or driver, connector, whatever. Let's try this. Let's just call it driver. So these are all my drivers. Finish. So there's my driver. Now what I want to do is I want to go where I got my driver, which is this MySQL stuff right here. This driver from MySQL right here. Take a look. I'm going to drag this driver right here, this connector, into that package like this, into the driver folder. And it says copy files. You can also copy and paste. Now that I have that in there, it's nice and in there. It's beautiful, but it's useless, right? Even though it's in there, it's still not connected. I have to connect it to the build path, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click onto it, and I'm going to go down to build path and click on add to build path. When I do this, right, it keeps my driver in a separate location, but it adds it to the build path. So notice how I have a reference library that says MySQL connector Java 5.1.3-7 jar, and now this looks very similar to my JRE system library in terms of the way it's encoded, right? So now I can access it. Now that I have my driver in place, it's part of my code. I can start coding my stuff that I need to do to connect to my database. One thing I should also give you guys for practice is I've created a little, I remember I did a little database. We kind of made it from scratch. I need to kick off, in order for my database to work, I have to have my local server. Remember last time we got together, we talked about our local server, WAMP. I use MAMP. You can also use MAMP for Windows, right? Or XAMPP or LAMP if you're using Linux, something else. I'm going to use MAMP. And I'm going to kick off MAMP down here by going to my application folder where MAMP is and double-clicking on it, right? I'm going to click Start Servers. And what this is going to do is it's going to ask me to give permission for the server to start, which I will. Once I've done that, it's going to show me that my servers are running at my MySQL port is 3306. And I'm also running on port 80. So if I was actually to do something like this, localhost, right? And on port 80, it's going to give me my MAMP Pro. I don't need to do that because I don't need any kind of Apache server at all. It's really for my MySQL database. What I do need to do, and this is why I need the Apache piece, is to do this. PHP myadmin. If I don't have Apache running, I can't do this. And what I need to do is inside my localhost, right? PHP myadmin, right? PHP myadmin is going to give me the admin panel to get into my database, right? For those people who don't know. Now I have this movie database here that I've kind of a few additional a piece of data in here for us to do testing today, right? So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go here and export my database, right? It's going to create a SQL file, and I'm going to click Go. When I do that, it shows me that this is the data that I can export. It shows me kind of a virtual or a view of my data. If I go back to, and this is, I can actually create a SQL file from this, or I can go custom, right? And if I want to save it as a file, right, I can certainly do that as well. I can say, you know, the location of my file, where it's going to go, my folder name, file name. I'm going to save my output to a file this time instead of it's going to go to a view. And it's going to be the database type, so I'm exporting, right? If I click on Go, it's going to ask me to download this moviedb.sql file. I'm going to keep it right now. I'm going to put it inside my lesson 11, right? So let's just go into my courses so that I have it for next time. And I'm going to go into 228, and inside my lesson 11, I'm going to put in my moviedb SQL file. Yay. Now, this is great for me, but it doesn't help you out. I want to go into Centennial College, into week 10. I'm going to create. I'm going to drag and drop that file, my SQL file, into. You know, hopefully, I may have to zip it, but only because, you know, SQL files and uploading. Huh? That's fine. I know, but I'm just saying it's probably just a little safer for me, and I won't kind of, you know, kill any flags or anything else that has happened out there. So let's go in there and do that. So I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to compress it to create a zip file, and I'm just going to throw that zip file up here too. And like I said, that didn't work somehow. Let's us. Why that didn't work? MySQL.zip. There. Yay, it's there. So go up on eCentennial and grab this one up, my MovieDB SQL, and import it. And the way we import our stuff is by going into our localhost phpMyAdmin. So again, if I was just to go localhost, right, localhost, and without anything else, I don't have a port. My localhost is running on port 80, right? I get this. You might get something else similar to this if you're running WAMP, right? And then I'm going to put in phpMyAdmin, right? If phpMyAdmin is working, you can do that. On the WAMP side, you just click on your WAMP server and go to phpMyAdmin in the menu, and it'll bring it up for you. That's the easiest way to do it. So if you actually go on the menu, the right side of where your WAMP server is running, and go to phpMyAdmin, it'll pull it up. Okay. So now that it's running, and I've got my local host, if I want to import, it's the same way as exporting. I click on, first I need to create a container for my movie database, right? And if I don't have one, I got to go to databases, and I got to create my database, and I should probably name it the same as my movie database's name. So I've called it MovieDB. So just call it MovieDB and click create. Once you have the container, then you can go in there into the container itself and click import, and I can import my SQL from my file that I gave you. Right, so you can import this format, and if I click on OK, it's going to ask me, well, what do you want to import? I got to import something. I can choose my file location, and of course I would choose the file that I'm importing. So 228, in my case, over here, it's right here, my moviedb.sql file, and click open, and then it would import that into my database. So now you can have exactly what I have. So please do that now. So please import that file into your database. Right? So you and I have the same content for our database. I've also changed the structure just a little bit, right? If you notice, if I look at my structure for my movie list, I have, and here's my movie list itself, I have things like an ID, a name, description, a release date, a rating, and a genre. And I've also made my rating an actual value, a number. And the reason why I've made it a number is so I can compare the number, right? Which I'm going to do later on. All right, so please let me know when you guys are ready with this. Who's uploaded their movie database? So I want to kind of check it out with you. Fahim? What do you mean? You having problems?
Oh yeah. PHP my admin is not.
So again, if you go to you have to run WAMP, right? And on the bottom, on the right side, where you bring up WAMP on the top, it says phpMyAdmin on that menu. See it? Click that. It's not coming up. Is it green? Is your app and it's still not coming up? That's bad.
Might be some configuration.
Could be.
But
Aaron, you're good?
yeah, I'm just importing. But then again, it's saying IIS 8.5 detailed error, so I think it's another server running at the same time. So
But then you shouldn't have a green. It shouldn't be green.
that's the point of it. I'll check for it.
Are you good? It's in the actual movie database itself. The SQL file I put up on eCentennial. Yeah, I put it up on week 11. Yeah, you just import it. Yeah, you import it. That's all you do. Does yours work?
Oh, you have to create a database.
You should create what you should do is create the database as a container, empty, and then import it into the empty database. Okay? Yeah, so you have to remove it and then put it in. Yeah. So there you can see it all. So I just added some details in there so you can see like there's action, adventure, and all stuff. So, all right. You guys good? So you've got our database, right? I've given you the SQL file to set up your own database. By the way, that MySQL database file will run on any version of MySQL, whether it's local to you or whether if you run it on the web somewhere. If you're going to run your own MySQL database, let's say through Azure or some other service, it'll run, right? All I have to do is import it into your database. Okay, cool. So I've got my SQL file. Now let's start thinking about how I'm gonna code my my program. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to create my connection information, and I can certainly create this information in the same file as this, but I usually like to keep it separate. And the reason for that is I want to hide my login information and so on. So your login, you should have, by the way, for your database, if I go back to phpMySQL, talked about this last time, you need to create a user with privileges. So if I go to privileges, notice that I've got a user called Thomas, right? That's me. Thomas is the username, password is 123456 or something like that, right? Yeah. So so you should create a user that has access to it has all privileges. And the way to do that, of course, like we did last time, as a review, is you click Add User, and then you create select the username. You put localhost. Let's say, for example, I'm going to put some new user. I'll call him new user, and my localhost is going to be the what's going to go here. And my password, I'll do the same thing: 123456. So 123456. And then over here, I'm going to check all for all of my privileges, and then I'm going to press Go. And when I do that, it'll create my user. If I go to users now, I can see my new user. It's right here with all privileges. If I want to delete the user, I click on my user, and then I press Go over here. And then that user, should be gone. Right? User. You need to have a user in order for you to connect to your database, right? I mean, this is like database 101, but just in case people don't know, that's why I'm going over it again. Let me make this a little bit larger for you guys to see. All right, so here's my movie database, going back to that. And if I look at my structure, my movie list is the only table that I have right now. My movie list table. My movie list table has movies, and they have some stuff here: an ID, a name, description, release date, rating, and genre. Right? Okay, going back. So I need to have a way of connecting to my database. I need to know the username. I also need to know my password to get on. I should also know my connection string, right? If I don't know these things, I can't connect to the database. Those are the first things. But I don't want to create it in a file, as an example, that is right here in my main driver file. I want to use it somewhere else. I want to create it somewhere where it has my configuration. So I'm going to create a new class, right? And I recommend you do this too, right? In the same package, a new class that I'm going to call db config, right? This class is not going to be a class we instantiate. It's going to be a static class that we use in order for us to hide the information a little bit. So we're db config and then finish. Here's what I don't need. I don't need a constructor for this class. We're not going to define a constructor, right? This is our config class for my database, right? So this is configuration utility class. That's all it is, right? So this is going to hold our details. So we're going to do something like this. We're going to say private static final string, and we're going to call this thing username. The username is going to be called Thomas, or whatever your name is going to be for your user, right? Do the same thing for passwords. So private static final string password, right? And that's going to be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a password, and in all of its text-driven glory, right? And now the next piece, which is a key. This is going to vary according to the type of database you're connecting to. So I'm going to say private static final string, and this is going to be called our connection string, right? You can also now we use on the underscore. If I go con string like this, this is typical when we use a constant because we can't camel case a constant, right? So we use underscores for constants to kind of represent camel casing. So two different words. So con string and equal to, again, the name of my connection string. Now this is interesting. Here's what I'm going to start typing. So I'm going to start typing the first thing, the type of connection, JDBC. That's the first thing you need to know. Then the type of database, MySQL, right? So if you were going to connect to a SQL database, an MS SQL, it would be a different connection string, right, than this. Colon, // Now your URL or IP address to the database. In my case, it's localhost. Because my localhost runs on 3306, I don't need to put a port. Otherwise, that would be next, right? / and then the name of your database. The name of your database after that. So movie BB. It's a string. That's my connection string. Are you with me? First pieces. Next piece. In here, I'm going to create something called a method. It's going to be a method. So public. There's my member private properties like this. So here's all my private properties. But these are private constants, right? Private constants. That's what they are, right? That's why they're static, final, all this kind of stuff. They never change, these ones. So this one's a public static. When I do public static, it means I don't have to instantiate it, right? Public static. And it's going to return a connection, right? Now, connection is a new type of variable that we haven't seen before. It's part of JDBC. And if you notice, if I'm hovering over it, I get a recommendation that something's wrong, right? Hey, what's wrong with my connection? Leave it for now, right? We'll say get connection. We're going to call this thing our little code is going to be called get connection. And what we want to do in this connection is we want to return, this is something interesting, our driver manager, which is we want to do dot get connection, right? And look what it says. It says now there's different signatures for this thing, right? And one of them is if I go to my driver manager. Notice how I added in my SQL driver manager for a second, right? I go get connection. Look at the get connection options there are. There's this one, the first one, just a string. There's one that has string and properties, and the third one's what I want: a URL, a username and a password, right? So I'm going to choose that one. My URL, I can choose because it's static and it's in my class. I have my URL, which is my constraint. My password is my username, and my password is my password. Right, so that's my first thing. Now I have a problem. If I hover over this connection, I get a couple things. One is import the connection. It says from Java SQL. That's the one I want. There's also another one from com.mysql.jdbc. I don't want that one. I want java.sql connection. Cool. Now I get another error. It says my driver manager. It says I've got an unhandled exception type SQL exception, right? And I need to handle this. Now there's a couple ways I could do this. I could surround this whole thing with a try catch, which I'm not going to do. Or I could add a throws declaration to my method, which I'm going to do. So when I say it's going to throw a SQL exception. Okay, cool. So that's my static object here. Okay, let's also do a couple things. I want to process my exception. So when I get an error, whatever the error is going to be, my configuration. We're going to talk a little bit of exception handling here as well. I want to do another method. So this method here, this static method. So this is a utility method that connects us to the MySQL database. That's what this does, right? So we need to do this. This is the part we're going to do today, the connection piece, right? Here's the next piece. I want to be able to map our errors a little bit more. I want to break out our errors so they're mean more to us. We're kind of some kind of error mapping or error, kind of handling kind of thing, right? So we're going to just call a utility method, to display that displays our errors in more detail. What do we call this thing? Well, we're going to make it again. It's got to be public. We're not going to instantiate this class ever, dbconfig. We're just using it as a container class that we can call upon, right? Almost like using its functions by calling the class as a namespace. Okay, so we're going to say public static void, and we're going to call this something like, instead of, we're going to call it display exception, and we're going to throw in there a SQL exception, because that's the kind of exception that we want, right? SQL exception, where we're just going to call the exception, whatever the exception is, right? Not returning anything, but what it's going to do, and by the way, here's a real shortcut for this. If I go sys error, right, sys error and control space, right? It does system.error.println, so printed in red as opposed to in black, right? And what I want to do here is I want to say error message, whatever the error message is, right? Plus my exception dot, and then the get message. Remember, we can use get message for, this is like any other exception in Java. All exceptions in Java have standard methods, and one of them is get message. I want to be able to get the message, and I want to be able to send it out, right? Let's do that again. So sys error, like this, control space, enter. It's going to give us this sys error print line, right? Do the same thing. Error code is our error code, plus, and then again it's the exception dot, and this time we'll say the get error code. I want to get the error code because every database has a different error code that it kind of displays as well. One more, sys error, and then control space, enter, and then we're going to say SQL state, because the state of your SQL server will change as well. It'll give us a bit of a code too. We can search these up online when we get them. So exception dot get SQL state. Cool. So that's our little config class. It's just a prep class for us to get ready to connect. We're not connecting yet, right? Let's, because I'm typing all this stuff out and it's hard for you guys to keep up, let's set up a GitHub kind of someplace on GitHub so you guys can follow along. So I'm going to do github.com and into Centennial College. I'm going to slow down so you guys can catch up too. In Centennial, what I want to do is I want to create this new repository, which we're going to call COMP228 lesson 11. And we're going to create this new repository. There we go. Okay, cool. I got it, but I want to create this new repository here locally. So I'm going to do it through Eclipse, like I've done before. I want to click on the project, right-click. I'm going to go to Team, Share Project. I'm going to go in here and create. It's going to ask me where. I want to take it to my courses into 228, down into my workspace, and look at lesson 11. Press open. It's going to give me an error, which I don't care for because now it's got my head in there. And I'm going to go right-click and Team, Commit. I'm going to go and say Initial Commit, or First Commit is also fair to put up. And notice I have a git ignore and all this kind of stuff. I can attach all of them by clicking all. And then I want to commit and push, but it doesn't know where to push. So I'm going to go back up to GitHub, grab this thing here, go back into here, put the URI in there, and then press next, next, finish. And that should push everything up to GitHub so you have what I have. Let's see. Refresh. There you go. So there's your settings. Here's something that's interesting. We created this reverse domain namespacing convention, right? Where we do com.companyname.jdbc. But guess what it did? It actually created folders for all this stuff. So actually there's the source folder. Inside the source folder you have a com folder. Inside the com folder you have a company folder, company name folder. Inside the company name folder you have JDBC. And inside there, that's all the folders. You have your, so it is like a namespace, right? It's just all you've done is you're separated by this, this methodology. So for example, for we talk about, I talked about Android. This is the way we do it for Android. Every time we create an, even for iOS, for Android and iOS, when we create a new application, we need to use reverse domain namespacing in order for us to sign our application with its original package name. Okay. Inside here we have dbconfig.java, which is the file that I just made, which is the configuration file we're going to use to connect to the database. Now yours would have to change. Your username obviously is not going to be toams. That's wrong anyway. Look at, I even caught it here. Toams. Wow, I can't even type my own name, guys. So let's change that. That change. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is going to be your own. And your connection string might be slightly different than mine because you might be connecting to a server with a particular port. For example, port 3306, right? Or port something else, right? Okay, cool. So we've got this piece done. We need the connection string piece to be finished. Okay, now that we've got that piece done, we want to be able to connect to our database. And there's a couple of things we want to do, right? How do we connect to it? Well, we want to be able to wrap this stuff in a try-catch, but I'll show you what happens when you don't do it. So if I go over here and I say something like this, I say, well, my connection then, which we're going to call con, right? Connection. Actually, let's just call it connection to make it look. So connection is equal to, right, then, here we go, dbconfig, remember this config, right? dbconfig dot, notice how it comes up because it's in my namespace, right? And it says class com.companyname.jdbc.dbconfig, that's the one I want, right? Dot. And then I want to do a get connection, right? Because remember, get connection returns the connection. It's actually going to return an object of connection type, right? Now I'm getting an error, right? And the error says, hey, Tom, there's a problem here. It says you can import my connection, so mysql.jdbc or the java.sql. I want the java.sql one. That's one fix. So because I need the import, java.sql.connection, right? And then the next piece that I need, along with this one, because it's still giving me an error. Look at db config, it says there's an error. It says add throws declaration. I could do that, right? Or I could surround with a try catch. Let's do it this way. Let's surround with a try catch for this one, right? So I'm taking my connection string and surrounding it with a try catch block. Here we go. All right, and it gives us this print stack trace in my catch, right? Which of course we don't want to use. We don't want to use this print stack trace. We want to use our db config display error thing that we just made. So we're going to say db config dot, and notice how we can display exception, right? We're going to pass in the exception, which is E in this particular case. We could also call, if we don't want to use E, undo. We could also just rename this one over here, the SQL exception, exception. And it would take care of the issues all for us. So with this little try catch, we were forced to do it. We didn't want to do it. I don't want to make a try catch, but I need to make a try catch block or else it'll error out. Make sense? So in order for us to know that we're good, I want to do a little bit of a system.out.println, and what's the shortcut for system.out.println on Eclipse? SYS out. Okay. So that's what sys out. Control space. You can do that, but sys out. If you do sys out like this, it does it all in one, right? So if I go like this, if I go sys out, so instead of doing all those silly system.out.printlns, sys out, control space, and it's done. So system.out.println, and then inside system.out.println, we're going to print out, connected to database, just to say that we're good if everything goes well, right? If it didn't go well, we're going to get an error, right? So let's see the kind of error we're going to get if we have a problem, right? So let's run this thing. Now, in order for me to run this thing, I need to create a run configuration. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go run configuration, right? And I'm going to point to my program that I'm running, right? Notice how it's not my JDBC demo that I'm doing. It's my own. And if I click down in here, right, notice how, I may not have one. I need to create a new one, right? So here's my new one. I'm not going to make it program 6. That doesn't make any sense. I've done it a couple times. I want to make this so it's kind of related. So it's a COMP228 called lesson 11. That's the run configuration name. I'm not going to change anything else, like my source, my JRE. But if I look through here, you can actually use arguments. I can change my class path. I can include or exclude certain things. I can use my, from a source perspective, I can remove stuff and add things, change my environment and so on. I'm just going to click run. If everything goes well, that's what I wanted to see. Connected to database. See? Connect to database. That means my connection to database has been successful. Do you all have this? Because if you don't have this, that means something went wrong. All right. By the way, on break, I'll come around and fix everybody. I know some people are having issues. Right? So here's something to check. If I change some of these connection details, for example, if I make my username wrong, right? So instead of Thomas, I add something like Tomasi to it, right? And I save. So I changed on my DB config. I changed my username from Thomas to Tomasi, right? And I run this now. I'm going to get this error message: access denied for user Tomasi at localhost. Using password, yes. Error code 1045. SQL state is 28,000 because this is how my display exception is handled. I made this, right, with this display exception method that's static that I called for my DB config. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, so let's change this back. So it's not a password, it's not a username anymore, but it's the wrong password. So it's a right username, the wrong password. I add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Save. Let's see what the kind of exception we're going to get when I run this now. So run. Error message: access denied for user Thomas. 1045. I get the same exact thing. How about if the string is wrong, right? Look, JDBC, MySQL, localhost, MovieDB, and I'll add a MovieDBI, right? So it's not the right table anymore, right? And I press run. Error message, unknown database, MovieDBI. Error code 1049 42000. So it actually tells you some details here if you break it out like this. That's why I did it. So we know what the problem is, why we're having a connection problem. So you should be able to get these issues. If you don't have a database set up or whatever, it should be right there. If you can't connect at all, how about you can't connect at all? So it's the local host. We, instead of on localhost, we go try and localhost some other thing like 33,000, right? Some other kind of port, right? Let's see what you get there. So trying to connect. Error message, communications link failure, right? The last packet sent successfully to the server was 0 milliseconds ago. The driver has not received any packets from the server. Error code 0, SQL state. So because my package is wrong, right? When I go back and if I try this again, this is how I can tell that I'm connected because it shows me that I'm connected to the database. Questions so far? Let's recap. I've done a couple things. First, I created my utility class, dbconfig.java. Do I have to do this? Absolutely not. I could put all this information in my driver class, but why would I, right? This, especially this stuff, I would never want to put in my driver class. I'd want to encapsulate this somehow like I'm doing, right? Further than that, I mean, this username and password is, you got to put it somewhere, whether you're using PHP, whether you're using JavaScript, whether you're using C#, it's got to be somewhere. The code for us to connect to the database, the password's got to be somewhere, right? And it's somewhere in the database. You don't want to make it so that it's a front-facing page like, my driver class. Number one. Second, I'm creating a utility method again that, the get connection method. What it does is it uses the driver manager. The driver manager, it's part of our SQL, our JDBC, right? That uses the get connection method to order up the connection string that we define, the username and the password. And again, the connection string as a reminder is the first piece is the type of database connection we're using, which is JDBC, which is the standard one that we use in Java. The type of database, MySQL. You can change this to other things like MS SQL. Right, and so on, different kinds of databases in here. Then the location of my database, whether it's local for us because localhost is here locally, right, or an IP address of where you want to have your database. Then followed by the database name, MovieDB. Right. Once we've done that, when we define that in our program.java file, all we're doing here is we're saying, make the connection, attempt the connection. And call this method to create the connection itself. And it's going to be housed, this object is going to be housed or copied into the connection object here inside of our database. So now I can use connection as an object to do stuff with. Okay, I know people have issues, right? So let me pause the recording right now and then go around. And when I come back, I want to talk about assignment number 5. So that way you guys have it. It's already up online anyway, right? You guys can look at it. And the due date, of course, is, I think it's 13th week. So it's like not the last week, but the 13th week. So 2 weeks out from now on Friday at midnight. All right, so I'm just going to pause the recording and I'll be right back.